The shy rancher's life changes forever when an Apache woman rides into his world. Samuel Clark lived in a quiet part of Arizona, far away from the busy towns and dusty streets most people knew. His ranch was small but well kept, with wide open fields stretching as far as the eye could see. The sun burned bright in the sky most days, and the wind whispered through the dry grass and low shrubs. Samuel liked it this way. He liked the calm, the silence, and the feeling that the world was just him, his cattle, and the land. He had lived on this ranch all his life. His parents had passed away when he was young, and he had inherited the property from them. Though the work was hard and sometimes lonely, he found comfort in routine and the simple pleasures of life. Every morning, Samuel woke before dawn. The sky was often painted in colors he found beautiful, soft pinks, light oranges, and the pale blue of early morning. He would put on his worn boots, a faded hat, and step out into the cool air. The smell of wet earth after morning dew filled his senses, and he always felt a small thrill as he walked among his cattle. Each cow, each calf was familiar to him. He knew their habits, their moods, and even the soft sounds they made when they were happy or upset. After feeding the animals, Samuel would check fences and repair any damage left from the previous night. A loose plank or a broken post meant trouble if not fixed quickly, and he took pride in doing the work himself. He liked things done right. He didn't need anyone else to tell him what to do. He had tried once to hire a helper, but it didn't last long. Samuel was shy and quiet, and he found it difficult to talk much with people. His words often came slowly, carefully measured. Those who tried to strike up conversation sometimes found him awkward, and eventually they stopped coming around. He had accepted it. This was his life. Evenings were the most peaceful for Samuel. After the long hours under the sun, he would sit by the fire in his small cabin, reading old books or writing a few notes about the day. He had a small collection of novels and stories, most of them worn and patched at the edges, but they were precious to him. Sometimes he read about distant places he would never visit or people who lived lives very different from his own. He felt a strange excitement in these moments, a quiet longing for something he could not quite name. Yet, when the night grew deep and the stars shone bright over the open fields, he always felt content. The silence of the land wrapped around him like a blanket, and he was never truly alone. Samuel's neighbors were few. A handful of ranchers lived miles away, and they only came by when necessary. Most days the town was nothing more than a small blur on the horizon, a place to buy supplies or collect the mail. Samuel rarely went. He preferred the company of his cattle, the rustling wind, and the steady rhythm of the land. His life was safe, predictable, and in many ways simple. But there was also a small ache inside him, a quiet wish for something more, though he hardly admitted it, even to himself. One warm afternoon, Samuel noticed a movement on the far edge of the prairie. He squinted against the sun and saw dust rising far in the distance. At first he thought it was the wind stirring the dry dirt, but then he realized it was something, or someone, moving fast across the plains. Curious, he climbed onto a small rise to get a better view. What he saw made his heart beat faster than usual. A lone rider was approaching, moving with speed and purpose. As she drew closer, Samuel could see that she was a woman, dressed in clothes that were different from anything he had ever seen. Her posture was confident, almost fearless, and her eyes scanned the land with sharp focus. There was a sense of strength about her, a wildness that both intrigued and unsettled Samuel. He watched as she guided her horse skillfully over uneven ground, her movements smooth and practiced. Samuel had handled horses all his life, but there was a certain ease in the way she moved that he admired. Something about her presence made the air feel different. He felt an unusual nervousness, something he had not felt in years. For a moment he considered going inside and pretending he hadn't noticed, but curiosity won. He grabbed his wide-brimmed hat and walked slowly toward the fence. When she arrived at the edge of his property, she slowed her horse and gave a polite nod. "Hello," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I'm looking for a horse that wandered off from my family's land. I think it may have ended up here." Samuel's mouth went dry for a moment. He was not used to speaking to strangers, especially not women. I haven't seen any horses," he said carefully, his voice soft. He tried not to stare, though he found it difficult not to notice her calm confidence and the quiet determination in her gaze. "My name is Aeon," she said, as if sensing his hesitation. "And you are?" Samuel Clark, he managed to reply. There was a brief silence. Samuel wanted to ask her more questions, but words seemed heavy on his tongue. Instead, he simply nodded, motioning toward the land. You can look around if you want. There's plenty of space. Aelin dismounted gracefully, her boots touching the ground lightly. She did not appear afraid, even though the land was unfamiliar. Samuel noticed the way she examined the surroundings, scanning the horizon, listening to the wind, and noticing small details he often overlooked himself. He found himself curious about her. She seemed to belong to the land in a way he never had. There was a quiet strength in her presence, a connection to the earth and the animals he had never felt from anyone else. Over the next few hours, Samuel and Aelin searched the nearby fields for the missing horse. She asked questions about his ranch, his work, and the land. Samuel answered as best he could, surprised at how easy it felt to speak to her. He found himself telling her things he rarely shared with anyone, how he kept notes about each cow, how he measured the grass for grazing, and how he sometimes stayed up at night, thinking about life beyond the plains. Aelin listened without judgment, nodding and occasionally offering a small piece of advice or observation. By late afternoon, they had not found the horse, but Samuel felt a strange sense of comfort being near her. She moved with purpose, respected the land, and seemed to understand the subtle language of the prairie. He had lived among these fields all his life, yet through her eyes, he saw them differently. The way she pointed out tracks in the dirt, or how to spot the faint signs of animals hidden in the brush, made him feel as if he was seeing the land for the first time. When the sun began to dip low, painting the sky with gold and orange, Aelin paused and looked at him. "Thank you for helping me today," she said sincerely. "It's not easy to find people willing to lend a hand." Samuel felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling he had not known in years. He wanted to say something meaningful in return, but all that came out was a soft, "You're welcome." As she mounted her horse to continue her search, Samuel watched her ride toward the horizon. The dust cloud she raised followed her, and she seemed to move effortlessly across the land, confident and free. He felt a pang of something he could not name, curiosity, admiration, perhaps the first stirrings of excitement in a life that had grown too quiet. That night Samuel sat by his fire, the memory of Aelin lingering in his mind. He thought about her strength, her knowledge, and the strange energy she brought into his quiet world. For the first time in a long while, he wondered what it might be like to share his life with someone else. Someone who understood the land, respected it, and could see the beauty he sometimes overlooked. He knew one thing for certain. His life, though unchanged for many years, had just been touched by something unexpected, and he could not help but wonder how much it would change in the days to come. The quiet rancher who had lived alone all his life felt a spark of possibility, and for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a world that included not only him, but someone else. After the first encounter, Samuel could not stop thinking about Aelin. Her confidence, her knowledge of the land, and the quiet strength in her eyes stayed in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. He went about his daily chores, feeding the cattle, fixing fences, and checking the fields, but something felt different. The wind over the plains seemed sharper, the sun warmer, and even the silence of the land carried a new weight. Samuel realized that for the first time in many years, he felt curiosity and excitement, emotions he had long buried beneath routine and solitude. The next morning, Samuel awoke before dawn, as usual. The soft glow of the rising sun touched the plains, making the grass shimmer with dew. He decided to check the northern pasture first, where he had noticed some unusual tracks the day before. As he rode slowly on horseback, he noticed familiar patterns in the dirt and faint hoofprints that hinted at the movement of animals he had not seen. Then in the distance, he saw her. Aelin. She was walking alongside a small herd of horses, carefully examining them one by one. Her eyes were focused, yet she seemed to carry a quiet energy that commanded attention. Samuel hesitated, unsure if he should approach or remain hidden. When she noticed him, she smiled faintly and waved. Samuel nodded in return and slowly rode toward her. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I had to make sure the horses were safe," Aelin replied, her tone calm but friendly. "And I thought I might find you here. You know this land better than anyone else." Samuel felt a warm sense of pride mixed with nervousness. He was not used to being appreciated, and certainly not by someone like Aelin. Her presence made him feel alive, aware of every sound and smell of the land. Together they walked among the horses, checking each one for signs of illness or injury. Aelin asked questions about the ranch, and Samuel answered honestly, sharing small details he had never told anyone before. She listened carefully, nodding and occasionally offering advice. Her knowledge of horses and the land impressed him. He realized she had a wisdom born from experience, something he had not encountered in the few people he had spoken to in town. As the day went on, Samuel and Aelin began to talk about more than just horses. Aelin told him stories of her family, her traditions, and the challenges they faced living in a world that often misunderstood them. Samuel listened with fascination. He had never met anyone who had lived through experiences so different from his own. Yet despite their differences, he felt a deep connection to her. Her words were not just stories, they were lessons, glimpses into a world he had never known but found himself wanting to understand. At times, Samuel struggled to find the right words. He was shy and his thoughts often moved faster than his voice. But Aelin never seemed impatient. She waited, listening with genuine interest, and that made Samuel feel safe. For the first time, he felt that he could share his life without fear of judgment. He told her about his childhood on the ranch, the loss of his parents, and the long years of solitude. He spoke of his small joys, like the beauty of the sunrise or the quiet satisfaction of a well-repaired fence. And in return, Aelin shared her fears, her hopes, and her dreams for the future. The hours passed quickly. Samuel found himself laughing more than he had in years. Aelin's presence had a way of lifting the weight from his shoulders, replacing it with a sense of possibility. He noticed small things about her, how her eyes lit up when she spoke of her family, the way she carefully examined the land, and the quiet strength she carried even in the face of uncertainty. For Samuel, these observations were not just details. They were the beginnings of understanding, a way to see her as a person, not just a visitor or a stranger. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, they prepared to leave the pasture. Aelin mounted her horse gracefully and Samuel followed on his own. The ride back to the ranch was quiet at first, each lost in their thoughts. Then Aelin spoke, breaking the silence. "You have a good heart, Samuel," she said softly. "It's clear you care for this land and the animals more than anyone else I've met, but I think you could care for people too." Samuel felt a flush of warmth in his chest. Her words were gentle, yet they struck a chord deep inside him. He had spent so many years hiding from the world, fearing connection, and now here was someone seeing him clearly. I try," he said quietly, unsure if his words were enough. "You do more than try," Aelin replied. "You live honestly, and that matters." The ride continued in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with a shared understanding. Samuel realized that he looked forward to these moments more than anything else in his day. The world he had known, quiet, predictable, and solitary, was slowly changing, and he found himself ready for it. Over the next few weeks, Aelin visited often. Sometimes it was to check on her horses, sometimes to talk or help Samuel with ranch work. Each visit brought new challenges and new lessons. Together, they repaired fences damaged by storms, guided lost cattle back to the fields, and even planted a small garden near the cabin. Samuel taught Aelin about the ranch, the cattle, and the rhythms of the land. In return, Aelin taught him tracking, herbal remedies, and ways to read the signs of nature. They worked side by side, learning from each other, growing closer with each passing day. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence near the creek, a sudden gust of wind carried a cloud of dust toward them. Samuel shielded his eyes, and when the dust cleared, he noticed Aelin standing still, her eyes fixed on something in the distance. A wild horse had wandered close to the creek, trapped in the reeds and unable to free itself. Without hesitation, Aelin guided Samuel through the best way to approach the animal. Together, they carefully freed the horse, calming it with gentle words and steady hands. Samuel was amazed at her courage and patience. He had dealt with many animals in his life, but the way she moved, spoke, and understood the horse was extraordinary. "That was incredible," Samuel said when the horse finally trotted back to safety. "It's about understanding, not force," Aelin replied with a small smile. "Animals feel fear just like people. You have to earn their trust." Her words stayed with Samuel long after the horse disappeared into the distance. He realized that the lesson applied not only to animals but to life itself. Trust, patience, and understanding were not easy, but they were worth the effort. and he began to see that these qualities could shape his own life in ways he had never imagined. As the weeks turned into months, Samuel's world continued to shift. The quiet rancher who had once avoided people now found himself eagerly awaiting Aelne's visits. Her presence brought life to the land, laughter to the cabin, and a sense of purpose beyond daily chores. Samuel began to speak more openly, share his thoughts, and even imagine a future that included another person. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat by the creek, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was a canvas of colors, reflected in the water, and the air carried the sweet scent of blooming desert flowers. Aelne spoke softly about her dreams of preserving her family's traditions, teaching younger generations, and protecting the land they loved. Samuel listened intently, feeling a deep admiration and respect for her vision. He realized that life could be more than routine, more than survival. It could be about connection, growth, and shared dreams. In those quiet moments, Samuel understood something important. Life was unpredictable, and sometimes it brought people together in ways that changed everything. Aelne had entered his world like a bright, unstoppable force, and he had no choice but to be affected. Her courage, knowledge, and presence challenged him to grow, to open his heart, and to embrace the possibilities of life beyond the ranch. By the end of that season, Samuel's life had already begun to transform. The isolation that had once defined him was fading, replaced by hope, curiosity, and the warmth of companionship. He had learned to trust, to share, and to see the world through new eyes. And he knew deep down that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with Aelne by his side. The shy rancher's life, once quiet and predictable, was now filled with energy, discovery, and connection. The land he loved remained the same, but he had changed. Samuel felt ready for whatever the future held, knowing that the presence of one remarkable woman had begun to reshape not only his days, but his very way of living and seeing the world. Spring had arrived on the plains, bringing warmth and life to the land. The fields around Samuel's ranch were greener than they had been all year, and the air smelled sweet with new grass and blooming wildflowers. Samuel and Aelne had grown closer with each passing day. Their bond, formed through shared work and quiet conversation, had become strong, like the roots of the trees lining the creek. Samuel no longer felt the deep loneliness that had weighed on him for years. He had learned to laugh more, to speak more openly, and to feel a sense of purpose beyond his daily routines. Aelne's presence had brought color and energy into his life, but with warmth also came challenges, things Samuel had never faced before. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high into the sky, Samuel noticed dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The wind shifted suddenly, and the normally calm prairie began to whisper warnings of an approaching storm. Aelne, who had been checking the far pasture, trotted toward him on her horse, her face serious. "This storm looks dangerous," she said. "We need to make sure the livestock is safe before it hits." Samuel felt a surge of worry. He had dealt with storms before, but something about this one felt different. It was larger, more powerful, and it seemed to move faster than the storms he knew. He nodded, a determination rising in him that matched the tension in the air. "Let's gather the cattle and bring them closer to the barn," he said. "We'll need to work together." Together, they guided the cattle through the rolling fields, urging them gently but firmly toward the barn. The wind picked up, tossing dust and loose straw into the air. Samuel could see the storm approaching, a wall of dark gray clouds stretching across the sky. Lightning flashed in the distance, and the first drops of rain began to fall, warm and heavy. He shouted instructions over the wind, his voice carrying urgency, while Aelne moved gracefully through the herd, calming the animals and keeping them from panicking. Despite their careful work, the storm hit harder than either of them expected. Rain pounded the earth, turning dry dust into mud, and strong gusts of wind bent the young trees along the fence lines. A large branch broke and fell near the barn, startling the cattle. Samuel and Aelne moved quickly, keeping the animals safe and guiding them inside. They worked tirelessly, wet and exhausted, but neither complained. The bond between them, strengthened over months of shared effort, carried them through the chaos. As night fell, the storm intensified. The wind howled like a wild animal, tearing at the fences and threatening the barn roof. Samuel and Aelne took shelter inside, listening to the rain hammering the tin roof above them. The storm was relentless, and they realized that the land they had worked so hard to protect was now in danger. Samuel felt fear, something he rarely allowed himself to experience, but Aelon's calm presence beside him reminded him that they were not alone. Together they could face whatever came. During the long hours of the storm, they shared stories and memories, keeping their minds focused and their spirits steady. Aeon spoke of her family, her childhood in the mountains, and the lessons she had learned from elders in her community. Samuel shared his own past, his struggles, and the quiet loneliness that had defined his life for so long. In the darkness and the storm's fury, they found comfort in each other's words. Suddenly, a loud crash shook the barn. One of the fences had collapsed, and a small herd of cattle had broken free, running toward the low hills beyond the ranch. Samuel's heart sank. He knew the animals could be lost if they did not act quickly. Without hesitation, Aeon sprang into action. She ran toward the escape route, her voice calling out calmly but firmly to guide the cattle back. Samuel followed, his boots sinking into the mud, the rain soaking him to the skin. Together they moved through the storm, guiding the frightened animals with skill and courage. Hours passed like this, each moment testing their strength, patience, and resolve. Samuel realized that he had discovered courage he never knew existed within himself. The shy, quiet rancher who had once feared speaking to others now shouted instructions over the storm, directed the movement of the herd, and made split-second decisions that saved the animals from danger. Aeon, too, showed bravery beyond anything Samuel had expected. Her calmness in chaos, her sharp instincts, and her ability to adapt to the unexpected were remarkable. By dawn, the storm finally began to pass. The rain slowed to a drizzle and the wind softened. Samuel and Aeon were drenched and exhausted, but the livestock had survived. The barn was damaged, the fences were broken in several places, and parts of the fields were flooded, but they had done it. They had saved their world from disaster. As they stood together, panting and wet, Samuel looked at Aeon and realized something profound. Life was unpredictable, but facing it with someone you trusted made everything possible. In the days that followed, they worked tirelessly to repair the damage. Neighbors, hearing of the storm, came to offer help, and Samuel began to see the value of community. He had spent so many years alone, thinking that solitude was the only way to survive, but now he understood that strength could also come from connection. Aeon stayed by his side, helping organize the work, teaching him new ways to repair fences and guiding the cattle back to safety. Samuel admired her determination and patience, and he felt a growing respect and admiration for the woman who had entered his life so unexpectedly. During a quiet moment after a long day of repairs, Samuel and Aeon sat on a small hill overlooking the ranch. The sky was clear, painted with soft pastel colors as the sun set. Samuel took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said softly. Aeon smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "We did it together," she said. "You have more courage than you know, Samuel. You just needed to see it for yourself." Her words struck him deeply. He realized that the storm had been more than just a natural disaster. It had been a test of their strength, their trust, and their ability to face life's challenges together. Samuel felt a sense of transformation within himself. The shy, isolated man he had been was no longer the same. He had discovered bravery, patience, and the power of partnership. Over the next few weeks, the ranch slowly returned to its former state. New fences were built, damaged areas of the fields were repaired, and the cattle were once again settled in their pastures. Samuel and Aeon continued to work together, their bond growing stronger with each shared task. The storm had left its mark on the land, but it had also left a mark on their hearts, a mark of resilience, trust, and growing affection. One evening, as they prepared to finish a long day of work, Samuel noticed a soft glow in Aeon's eyes. She had been quiet for some time, watching the horizon. "Samuel," she said gently, "I've learned a lot from you. You care for this land in a way that few people ever will, and you care for others too, even if you didn't realize it before." Samuel felt a warmth spread through him. "I've learned a lot from you as well," he replied. "You've shown me how to face life with courage and grace, how to care for others and trust myself." They shared a moment of quiet understanding, sitting together on the hill as the sun disappeared behind the distant mountains. In that moment, Samuel realized that life had changed forever. The shy, reserved man who had once been content with solitude now felt a deep connection to someone who had challenged and inspired him. Aelin had brought light into his life, and together they had faced the hardest test of their world, the storm, and emerged stronger. From that day on, Samuel knew that he would never be the same. The ranch was more than just land and animals. It was a place where he had discovered courage, connection, and the possibility of love. Aelin had not only changed his life, but she had also shown him a new way to live with trust, bravery, and an open heart. And as the stars began to shine in the night sky, Samuel felt a quiet excitement for the future. He had faced the storm and survived, not alone, but with someone who had become an essential part of his world. The shy rancher had grown into a man ready to embrace life fully, and he knew that with Aelin by his side, no challenge would ever seem too great. After the storm had passed and the ranch was repaired, life slowly returned to its natural rhythm, but Samuel's world felt different. The days were no longer quiet and predictable. They were filled with energy, purpose, and connection. Aelin had stayed nearby, not only to care for her horses, but also to help Samuel manage the ranch and organize the land. She moved with ease, guiding him, offering advice, and sharing her knowledge of the environment. Samuel found that the ranch itself had become a symbol of their partnership, a place where two very different lives came together to create something stronger and better than either could manage alone. The mornings began with the soft glow of the sunrise reflecting off the fields. Samuel and Aelin would ride through the pastures, checking on the cattle and the fences, and sometimes simply enjoying the quiet beauty of the land. The sounds of the prairie, birds singing, cattle lowing, wind brushing through the grass, were no longer just background noise. They became part of their shared life. Samuel found that he was no longer lonely. He looked forward to each day not just because of the work, but because of Aelin, her presence bringing a warmth and energy that had once seemed impossible. Over time, the bond between Samuel and Aelin grew deeper. They shared stories from their pasts, dreams for the future, and small moments of joy in everyday tasks. Samuel taught Aelin how to care for the cattle in ways specific to his ranch, how to read the grass for the best grazing, and the rhythm of the land through the seasons. Aelin taught him to observe more closely, to understand the signs of nature, the movements of birds, the tracks in the soil, and the whispers of the wind. Their lessons were not formal but came naturally, built from shared work and mutual respect. Samuel realized that life had become richer because of this exchange. One afternoon, as they worked together mending a broken fence on the northern edge of the property, Samuel paused to watch Aelin. She moved with confidence and purpose, handling each task with care and attention. Her long hair fell across her shoulders, catching the sunlight, and her eyes sparkled with determination and kindness. Samuel felt a rush of admiration and gratitude. He had lived so many years alone, believing that solitude was all life had to offer. Now, he could not imagine facing the world without her. Samuel, Aelin said, looking up from the fence, "I think this land has changed too, not just because of the storm, but because of us working together. It feels alive." Samuel smiled. He had noticed it as well. The ranch had always been beautiful, but now it seemed more vibrant, more connected to life itself. "It does," he replied. "I think we've both grown here, not just the land, but us too." Their days were filled with shared labor, laughter, and quiet reflection. They repaired fences, tended to the cattle, and prepared for the changing seasons. Aelin introduced new ways to care for the land, planting small gardens with medicinal herbs, while Samuel showed her how to maintain the water systems and manage the pastures effectively. Each day brought new lessons and small victories, and each evening they would sit together by the cabin, sharing meals and stories, enjoying the comfort of companionship. Over time, the community began to notice the change in Samuel. Neighbors who had once seen him as distant now admired the work he and Aelin did together. He no longer shied away from conversation, and his quiet confidence inspired respect. Aelin's presence helped bridge gaps between cultures, and her gentle guidance allowed Samuel to see the value of collaboration. Together, they had not only strengthened the ranch, but also built connections with the people around them, forming a small network of support and friendship. One particularly beautiful evening, Samuel and Aelin sat on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sky was painted with the colors of the sunset, and the air was filled with the scent of wildflowers. They watched as the cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures, and the wind carried a soft melody through the tall grass. Samuel felt a deep sense of contentment. He had faced storms, challenges, and years of isolation, and now he found himself in a life filled with purpose, trust, and companionship. "I never imagined life could be like this," Samuel said quietly, his voice almost lost in the breeze. Aeon turned to him, her eyes warm and steady. "Life is full of surprises," she replied. "Sometimes it takes someone to show you what's possible." Samuel took her hand in his, feeling the strength and reassurance of her touch. He realized that Aeon had become an inseparable part of his life, someone who understood him in ways no one else ever had. "You've changed my world," he said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "And you've shown me a new way to live," Aeon replied. "A life that balances tradition with understanding, strength with patience. We've grown together." In the weeks that followed, Samuel and Aeon continued to build their shared life. They planned improvements to the ranch, prepared for the next season, and explored the surrounding land together. Their relationship deepened, not only through love and friendship, but also through shared responsibility and the mutual respect that came from facing challenges side by side. Samuel had never felt more alive. One morning, they found a lost foal near the edge of the property. Samuel and Aeon worked together to guide it safely back to the herd. The small act reminded them of the importance of patience, care, and teamwork. Samuel realized that life itself was much like the ranch, requiring attention, effort, and understanding. And with Aeon by his side, he felt capable of facing whatever challenges lay ahead. As the years passed, Samuel's ranch thrived. The land was healthy, the cattle were strong, and the fences were secure. More importantly, Samuel had changed. The shy, reserved man who had once lived in quiet isolation had grown into someone confident, compassionate, and deeply connected to the world around him. Aeon had become more than a friend or partner. She was a part of his life, shaping his thoughts, actions, and dreams. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant mountains, Samuel and Aeon stood together, looking out over the ranch. The sky was ablaze with color, the wind whispered through the grass, and the cattle moved peacefully in the fields. Samuel felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had faced storms, uncertainty, and years of solitude, but he had emerged stronger with a partner who had taught him the meaning of trust, courage, and love. "Life is different now," Samuel said, his voice calm but full of emotion. "Yes," Aeon agreed. "It's richer, fuller, because we faced it together." Samuel nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The shy rancher who had once believed his life would always be quiet and predictable had discovered something far greater: connection, purpose, and the possibility of a shared future. He realized that the world was no longer something to face alone. With Aeon, he had found strength, friendship, and love, all in the land he had once thought he knew so well. The ranch continued to flourish, as did their bond. They celebrated small victories together, from a new calf being born to the successful planting of a garden that flourished under Aeon's care. Samuel learned to trust not only the land, but also the people around him, understanding that life was richer when shared. The shy, quiet man he had once been had grown into someone capable of joy, connection, and courage. And as the stars began to fill the night sky, Samuel sat beside Aeon by the cabin, feeling the warmth of her hand in his. He thought about the journey that had brought them together, the quiet mornings, the shared labor, the storm that tested them both, and realized that his life had been transformed in ways he could never have imagined. He no longer feared the unknown. He no longer feared connection or change. Samuel had learned that life's challenges could be faced, that trust and partnership could create strength, and that love could grow even in the most unexpected places. Aeon had entered his world like a sudden wind, stirring the quiet plains of his life, and had remained as a guiding force, transforming not just his days, but his very way of being. Together, Samuel and Aeon faced the future with confidence, knowing that they had built a life filled with meaning, resilience, and care. The shy rancher had found his voice, his courage, and his heart. And as they looked out over the rolling fields, the gentle rustle of grass, the distant mountains, and the endless sky, Samuel knew that his world had changed forever, and for the better. In the end, it was not the land that had changed him, nor the storm, nor the passing years. It was the connection with another human being, someone who saw him fully and encouraged him to grow. And as the night settled peacefully over the ranch, Samuel realized that life's greatest gifts were often unexpected, but when they arrived, they could transform everything.